Hey, I hope you're having a great summer. I'm Misha, a Paris-based filmmaker, and this video is a talk with my friend Denys Lisovets, a cinematographer from Ukraine, currently living in Toronto. The topic of the video is starting out in a new environment as a DP. We talk in Ukrainian, so what you're going to hear is a voiceover. And before we start, please give it a like. This way the algorithm will show the video to more people. Let's watch the latest showreel by Denis and then jump right into it. Denis, hello. Good to see you again in Paris. Thank you for taking the time for our talk.
Glad to see you too.
The topic of our conversation today is how to start from scratch in a new environment. You are the perfect person for this. Your biography began in Kyiv, then somehow moved here to Paris, and then continues in Toronto. Tell us how you started out, how you chose your profession, and whether you immediately realized what you wanted to be.
So I started as a photographer. I photographed BMXers, breakdancers, because I did it before. I liked being in that company, and for some reason I decided to photograph them. I liked to watch them, their frozen dynamics in the frame. And at one point, I got on the set of Kia Motors in Kyiv as a dancer. And I really liked the atmosphere. I was amazed by the film set after that. I wanted to just exist there, just do something. I was incredibly pleased with what these people were doing. And I decided that I wanted to move into this industry. So my next steps were already as a still photographer. I started photographing some film sets, doing BTS, making of, being present at the shooting process. And during my studies at the university, I felt that I wanted my frame to move, to give it some dynamics, and that's how the video started. I started to move a little bit more and more into the video. And the decisive moment was the movie I decided to make. It was a very student movie. I hadn't studied at a film university yet. I studied at an aviation university, a completely different industry. And I realized that if I didn't start moving in the direction of cinema myself, no one would put me there or give me permission to go there. So I decided to film something. I wrote the script myself, directed it, invited my friends who helped me a lot, and the first small short film came out.
Were you already studying in Kyiv at that point?
Yes, I was already doing my studies in Kyiv.
Tell us about the moment you realized that you wanted to study. How much time has passed and how long you've been practicing photography for?
To study at a film university.
Yes. Did you do a little photography and then decide to go to school a year or so later and find a place to study? Or did you spend a lot of time, I don't know, 3 or 5 years taking pictures and working there, and somehow it came a little later?
Yes, I have been taking pictures and filming for a long time. It was probably for 3 years when I started shooting, and I started to have some projects. They were quite important. I got my first big project, the Mahach project, which really pushed me up. I didn't know a lot of things, and when I got there, I was entrusted with organizing the whole crew and the set. My friends helped me, and we grew together. And it grew into the fact that I realized that I wanted to study, so it was organic. I felt that I needed some more information. I was missing it. I felt that I liked what I was doing, but I didn't understand whether I was doing it right or wrong. So I wanted to understand the meaning of the word right, to understand the rules and start breaking or ignoring them.
Let's specify what was your role on this project. Were you just a director of photography or something else at the same time?
Yes, I was hired as a producer. It turned out that the client saw what I was doing, and I usually made some sports videos, commercials, and I was very invested in them. I wanted to make something that was not just ordinary. I wanted to make it well. I didn't want to just make money with it. I wanted to grow. That was my main goal. And somehow the universe mirrored this, and I was offered the project. People realized that I didn't have much experience to do any large-scale filming.
But still you had a portfolio that you were not ashamed to show.
But yes, I had something to show and they trusted me. And for that I'm very grateful. It was an incredibly strong boost for me. And I consciously realized that this was a boost for me, a great case. And I invested myself in the project as much as possible. I dove in headlong. I lived the project, and I lived it for a very long time. I went there as a producer. And there I tried to combine these two professions. I thought it was very strange at the time.
Director of photography and producer.
Yes, I thought it was very strange and somehow unrealistic. But these patterns were slowly breaking down in my head, and I was moving forward. I was pulling up my friends, acquaintances, everyone I knew. Many people helped, and I'm very grateful to them. And the person who offered me the project is an incredible friend, and a man to whom I will always be grateful for this project, because the project gave me very great opportunities for my creativity. I could try any technique there, almost any technique, and it was unrealistically cool. So that was my first project and basically the road to filmmaking.
You started it before entering the institute, got enrolled, started studying, and at the same time this project continued for several years.
Yes, it turns out that I graduated from my first university, an aviation university. About a year passed. During this year I was filming, and a year later, when I started this project, I realized that I had to go on studying. At that time I had already been on the project for about 7 or 8 months. During this project, at the same time, Before the launch of the project, I made another short film, more serious, more professional. It took a very long time to prepare, a whole year, to write the script and assemble the team. It was COVID and everything lasted quite a long time. So, by the time I entered the university, I already had a portfolio. It was more professional and more focused on cinematography.
Great. Today we talk about how to start in a new environment or even on a new continent. It's very pathetic, but I would like to focus on how to start in a profession in a new place. And my question is, do you remember the moment when you realized, I am a director of photography, or I want to become a director of photography, that you're not a sport photographer, that you identify yourself more as a cinematographer or maybe a camera operator or something else?
I didn't have this kind of realization that I wanted to be a cinematographer all at once. But I remember that this second short, I realized that I really like cinematography more than anything else. Because before that, I had already tried producing, directing, lighting, writing, and all in one. I mean, I already understood where I wanted to go, and I realized that when I was on set, this is what I like. I really enjoy being behind the camera, seeing the shot and preparing it and seeing my work on the screen. That's what I really enjoy.
Great. Let's move on to your studies in Kyiv. This is another beginning for you, as I understand it. We are well aware that any education will not take responsibility for who you will become, but I'm sure that you have learned something for yourself. Tell us about this new beginning, studying in Kyiv.
Well, there are stereotypes that studies are not needed in our field, and that you can cope without them. I don't agree with this, because when I started studying, I did it as consciously as possible. I knew what I needed. I don't just want to go because there is a stereotype that you have to study somewhere. I wanted to go because I realized that I was missing it. I was motivated to study. And when I got there, I was motivated to sit in class and emphasize what I had missed on the set. And there were quite a few things. And I think that what is taught at the university is very difficult to find on the set. It's very difficult to find any theory. You will never analyze a lens on set, or you will never understand the inverse square law.
I get you.
That's why I think learning is very important, and I have taken a lot from my studies. It helped me and continues to serve me.
Did you already have any contacts at that point? Maybe the beginning of your studies or sometime before or after that? Let's call it the initial stage. Did you have any contacts of cameramen, maybe first of all in Kyiv, who had already achieved success, whether they studied at a film school or not, but someone you looked up to and who could show you the way a few steps ahead? You can say the names or not, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Somehow I always wanted to have a mentor. I really wanted to have a person to learn from, to be by my side and be of assistance in everything. But for some reason, I couldn't find such a person. And I had to go on my own way. But I had a DP who I could always ask for advice, a very experienced cinematographer who has already achieved success in his profession, Yuri Korol, a Ukrainian cinematographer. I really like what he does, how he shoots. I give him my greetings. He helped me in many ways. He helped me with questions that I couldn't find answers to at the university, on the internet, or from friends.
I personally had the feeling that in Ukraine it is formed in such a way that there is a certain leap between education and the set. So it was your bridge between these two worlds that don't always intersect, right?
I didn't have a leap between studying and the set. Everything happened organically for me, in terms of practice, on the set. But this mentor was a person who could give me confidence that I was on the right track. Because when you're not sure, you go into a void. Even if you are doing everything right, you start to catch some doubt somewhere, and it distracts you. And to block it out, I would call and say, Yura, tell me, if this is the right direction, if I'm thinking correctly.
And what question, for example? Do you remember a specific request?
I remember on the second film, which is called Reflexio, we discussed with him the question of anamorphic lens. The difference between lenses, how to choose the best anamorphic lens for our task. Since I didn't understand the characteristics and visual qualities of the lens, I was addressing Yura. I was saying, Yura, I don't know what this lens is supposed to give us. Tell me what you see in this lens or that one. And we talked about lenses, for example. This was one topic.
You said the phrase leap into the void, or somehow you expressed it similarly about the void. What do you mean by that? Could you expand a little bit? Because there is a void that provokes a surge, and there is a void that provokes a block, a lack of understanding of what to do. What kind of void are you talking about?
It is an emptiness that definitely moves you forward. I am moving in it. I want to understand what kind of space it is, but I have a doubt that maybe my thoughts are wrong, that maybe what I'm broadcasting in the world is wrong. And I realize that this is also a path and an experience, that something is not right. It's quite okay. It's very good. But I wanted to emphasize the information. Okay, maybe I made a mistake. If it is a mistake, I want to correct it. And so there was no understanding of whether it was a mistake or not, or if there were any mistakes at all.
So when there is emptiness, emptiness equals the need for a mentor?
Not necessarily. Maybe there are people who feel that they are doing everything right and don't need the thoughts of other people at all.
So they have no emptiness?
Maybe they don't have a void in them. I had the same experience, and I'm telling you, there are people who think that studying is not necessary, that all this information is available on the internet or on set, or you can find it somewhere. I believe that our profession of a cinematographer is a profession of a person who stands between the director and the film crew. This is a person who can translate the technical part from the director, from the creative point of view. That is, he or she passes the entire script through himself or herself and says how to relay it to the screen, how to show the viewer with his or her shoot that this is how the director wants to feel. How to prove your film and crew that it is the thing that we should do in order to achieve the goal. So, for me, a cinematographer is a person who passes stories through himself and, as a catalyst, filters out what doesn't need to be said and passes it on. That's a cinematographer. And of course, he adds creativity, no doubt.
Could you share how you were formed in Kyiv?
From what you said, you studied at the university. Kyiv National University of Culture and Arts, but at the same time you had someone to ask for advice. So you were formed not only at the film school.
Yes,
Tell us what is the role of the film school and what is the role of something else and what exactly.
at film school I understood and emphasized the technical part more. And it was at the university where I studied, in Kyiv, for the first 2 years, because I entered the second year right away. And in the second and third year, I emphasized the technical base. It was very cool, because you have to search for such a technical base. And there everything was prepared. Everything was clear about what lenses are made of, what light is made of, and why it is different, why lenses are different, and what filtration is. So all these things were already understood, and I just had to go deeper into them and have the desire. But I didn't find mentorship at the university, where I could turn to teachers who would explain everything I wanted to know and who would help me a lot. Unfortunately, I didn't find this. And I found it, let's say, in another area.
In other stages of your life?
In other stages, in other people. It was in cinematographers, sometimes in producers, sometimes in directors. When I was already working as a DP, I took projects as a still photographer, but they were projects that I chose. I could choose, I could filter, and I chose projects that I liked by the content of the team, what kind of director and what kind of DP there is. And there I also communicated with the team. There were foreigners, I was often on foreign shoots, and I constantly communicated with the DPs. I would just come up to them and ask them, why this? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? So I wasn't ashamed of it.
That was still in Kyiv?
Yes, it was still in Kyiv. I wasn't ashamed of it. I realized that not asking is a mistake. When you ask, you are not wrong. I mean, not knowing is normal. Everyone learns. But when you don't seek this knowledge, it is a mistake. When you think that you know everything or you have already achieved success and the peak of your understanding in some area, I think it is a mistake, because I don't know how to reach the peak. It is probably impossible. Everything is constantly evolving and you're constantly learning.
I cannot disagree. Then let's summarize this so-called Kyiv stage of your life. The profession of a cinematographer is quite a sensitive thing. You watch a lot of films, you do a lot of things that you can't always put into some kind of record of your work. But if you make a list of some things, maybe more or less specific, that Kyiv gave you, in and out of film school,
I'd like to add that I also got information from the internet, of course. I have this tendency that I may not watch a movie, a famous movie, but I will definitely watch the making of or the BTS of this movie. I will definitely read the interviews with the cinematographer or the director and will understand the context and how the production took place.
So you first choose a making-of, and if you like the making-of, you watch the movie, rather than if you liked the movie, you watch the making-of?
No, it is just that I was somehow catching up on more information about making-of, and didn't always have time to watch the movie. I don't really like to watch on my phone or laptop. I need a big screen, an atmosphere, concentration. And I didn't always find that kind of atmosphere for watching movies. So it was easier on the phone, somewhere on the road, in transit between shootings or traveling or whatever. You can look, read information, watch a making of and realize, oh, they use this and I'm moving in a different direction on this question. Maybe it is not right. And I reflected on all this and kept digging and digging. As for what Kyiv and the university gave me, I think that in Kyiv there are immense horizons of art, both cinema and any other art, that have not been discovered. And when I was studying and working, they began to open up, maybe only for me. But after talking to experienced colleagues, I realized that it was after the Soviet Union. In Kyiv, there was a decline in cinema, a decline in art, a destruction of culture. And from some year on, it started to grow steadily, constantly up, up and up. New talents, new creative ideas, and I picked up a lot in Kyiv. I consider it my creative home, 100%. It was very strong both at the university and on sets. The sets pushed me forward a lot.
Is there anything you regret about your time in Ukraine? While studying or before, maybe you didn't agree to some project or agreed to some uninteresting one. Do you regret something so important? Any mistake that you would like to show to other people who are now thinking about starting their way in the profession of cinematographer and they have questions about whether to enroll there, enroll here, not enroll, go to the set and serve coffee? Something that you regret and would like to change and want to help others so that they don't repeat your mistakes?
No, I don't have any mistakes that I would like to correct. I mean, I would like to correct them, but I wouldn't want to repeat them or change them. Because it is all experience, and I approached all my previous experiences with the same attitude. I analyzed the information. For example, when I enter a university, I analyze what kind of teacher will be there, what's in this university. I collect feedback. I go to another school, I analyze what is happening there, what can I get from it. So I'm constantly analyzing, and analysis is important. That is, this unwillingness to go blindly and the desire to learn like 2-3 steps ahead. It constantly led me to analysis. So I constantly analyzed, and that's why I chose this university, and it happened that I worked on some projects that I wanted. I realized that this is where I can get knowledge and experience, and this is the most important thing, not money, not some other things, but the experience and the desire to be on the set. It's so important, I think.
So you didn't look for any prepared answers or advice from people on which way to go. You tried to form your own broadest picture, right?
Of course, I did. Who doesn't look for the right answers? Who doesn't want to be taught what to do? Of course, I was looking, of course, I wanted to, but at some point I realized that no one would tell you. No one will tell you how to do things right, because everyone has their own experience. Even if you are as similar as this person as possible, you have the most similar path, you will still do things differently. So you can only emphasize something for yourself and understand what they went through and how they might or might not have wanted to do it, but you will experience it differently in any case. So it's like this.
Apart from Mahach, have you had any projects of a similar level? It doesn't matter what your role was, whether it's a director of photography, or maybe a making of, or something like what you said. What were the first projects that started to take you to a new level, but still in Ukraine?
Yes, there was a music video with director Alexander Yevtushenko. It was our first project together. A video for the band Cloudless. It was a really cool experience. I like that I could be as creative as possible there. Because if some other commercial projects I shot back then, whether it was sports advertising or the same Makhaч project, in any case, it was more a commercial project. There are some frameworks, there are clients, sponsors, and you have to take their opinion into account. I mean, the framework in terms of production.
So let's say the storyboard was already done before you were invited to the project?
No, this project I was lucky enough, they didn't understand what kind of storyboard etc. they wanted, and it was cool, but they understood that they needed to integrate their sponsor's logo and some kind of advertising for it all, but I think it's a very normal thing and it's okay. But the music video was full of creativity. I mean, you just come up with an idea with the director, you want to bring to life what he already saw in his head, you want to strengthen it, improve it, and convey it to the viewer. And I really liked it. It was my first serious experience in clip making, in music videos. So, thank you very much to Sasha, a person who also trusted me, and during this trust, I always said that I would try to do my best. I mean, this will not be a passing project for me. If it's a project where I'm accepted and trusted, I will do my best. I will die. I don't know what I will do, but it will be the maximum I can achieve, and I will bend as far as possible. So, yes, there were projects that were very motivating, and we did more than one shoot with Sasha.
In Ukraine?
In Ukraine.
Can we conclude your Ukrainian chapter with this and move on? Or is there anything else important about it?
I just wanted to add that all this way it happened very organically. It all flowed from photography and video, from the hip-hop industry to the film industry. I was just looking for myself and kept making documentaries in my life. I mean, I was documenting something, analyzing something as it happens in documentary. But there was a nuance that I would like to emphasize, is that I didn't stop doing it. This is very important when you are moving.
In other, let's say, hobbies?
No, not in another hobby, but in your movement on the way to something. And I didn't stop.
You mean as a cinematographer?
Yes. In general, it's about finding yourself. I didn't stop. Like me, for example, I found myself, or someone found themselves, or someone is looking for themselves. The main thing is to go for it and not stop. Or, as it said, the main thing is not the speed with which you go, but the constancy. The constancy of this process is the most important thing. So I'd like to emphasize this, it is very important, constancy. Even if it is some small steps, but they are constant.
Have you already found yourself in Kyiv? Or were you still looking for yourself after Kyiv?
What do you mean?
I mean, like, I'm Denys Lisovets, a cinematographer who shoots mostly fiction films, or I have shot mostly fiction projects, but I also admit that I may want to be more of a documentary. I like short form more than long, color or black and white, whatever. Have you already found yourself, or is the search still goes on?
No, the search continued, of course. There were some attempts to define myself as a cinematographer of such things. I like to shoot this, but it was more of a quick decision, I mean. I quickly identified myself as a cinematographer. I like cinema, then I made a music video and I was like, whoa, maybe I like this more. A music video story can also be told in terms of cinema, but very briefly. It's also interesting. Then I made a documentary and I said, yeah, it's hard, but I like the result, it's interesting. So the search continued and it didn't end in Kyiv.
Well, then we moved to Paris.
Let's go.
The war has started. Everyone knows about it, and it's not new to anyone. Ukraine remains in the news, unfortunately. Tell us why you decided to stay in Paris, whether it was a decision to continue your career as a cinematographer or not. If it was for some personal reasons, you can say so. We are moving to Paris.
Okay, let's move to Paris. The war started, and like everyone in Ukraine, the war affected them very much, changed their lives and their way of life. And between volunteering and trying to promote what I can do, trying to go to the front, trying to find some projects about the military that is helping as much as I can. In all these efforts, I realized that the doors were closed and we were losing money, we couldn't find projects, we were volunteering and it was very good. But the question was whether we could continue it abroad or whether we could find projects at the front somehow. It was impossible at that time. Although I was using all my search capabilities. And at some point, I had finished my third year at the Kyiv University of Culture and Arts, and I realized that I would have to go through the fourth year, and I didn't want to because it was important for me not to pass the study and get a diploma, but to learn something. I thought, okay, let's try to find a university where I can study, and then I will finish my studies in Ukraine. And so the search of education began with an analysis of where there are universities in general. I've always had an idea of studying abroad. It was not a spontaneous thought in my head. Even while studying in Kyiv, I really wanted to study abroad. I thought that I would go for a master's degree there or later study somewhere else.
So you had a goal that you had to study somewhere else in your life other than Ukraine?
Yes, I really wanted to, very much. I wanted the experience of studying abroad. I was really interested in how they teach abroad. I wanted to communicate with foreign mentors. It was also very interesting for me. And the first point I started to analyze was where there were universities in general. I had a big sheet with all the universities in Europe and America on it. So I made myself a very big sheet and I just sent emails, sent my portfolio, described the situation.
While still in Ukraine?
While I was still in Ukraine. And I got accepted to Madrid. And I got accepted in Munich. But to the documentary program, which I didn't really like because I didn't want to make only documentaries. And then, through the search, I talked to Nikita Khatsarevich, and he told me that there was Misha Husak, who lives in Paris.
Nikita, we say hi if you're watching this.
Yes, Nikita, hi. And this path of searching led me through friends of friends to the fact that there is a university in Paris where you can also apply, which I did.
And which one did you choose? Because you and I had a parallel path.
Yes. And I didn't know whether I was accepted or not because we talked to the Femis University for a very long time. They were thinking for a long time, selecting, making decisions because it was a special course for Ukrainian artists. They took 5 artists from 5 categories from Ukraine: a producer, a cinematographer, a script supervisor, a director, and I think they were also looking for some other position, like an editor or a sound engineer, but at the time they didn't find this position. We called and emailed a lot, and they asked me a lot of information about my experience, about my studies, and I think they analyzed and asked me an interesting thing. Did I have experience with French productions? Or with France, did I speak French? They were very interested in that. I did have such experience. I worked in Ukraine with a French production on the Infinity series. I was a still photographer there. I made stills, which I was really happy about. An incredibly cool project with a very cool level of shooting done by Ukrainians in collaboration with the French. But it was a purely French series. For them it was a very important point, and it probably emphasized their choice because they contacted the producers of the series and clarified whether I had really worked and whether I really had experience and what the feedback from these producers was. And it so happened that I was accepted, and I found out that there would be 2 cinematographers studying camera work, not one as they wanted. There was Nikita Aksionov, a cinematographer from Odessa, who also got enrolled there, and this is how I started my journey of studying abroad.
A new beginning.
A new beginning, a new stage. We didn't realize what kind of stage it would be. And it's scary to look back because it was an incredibly difficult time of moving. No one understood for how long we were leaving Ukraine. But we left with the idea that I would study and we would return. And we live with this thought to this day, and here we are in Paris.
Great, but you didn't speak any French at all when you arrived.
Yes.
Tell us how you adapted, whether there were many obstacles at the film school, whether people were able to adapt, and how you managed in general. And it would be interesting to know when you felt comfortable in this new environment.
Traditionally, I analyzed what kind of university it was in more detail. It is clear that it is a very famous university, in the top rankings in Europe and in the world. But I wanted to know what exactly makes it stand out. After analyzing all this information, preparing for it, of course, by talking to the people who took me, I said that I didn't know French and I would try to learn it because I really like the approach of this university. And the approach was that every month or 2 months or every 2 weeks you have a different tutor. He comes and teaches only one subject or one topic for that period.
So you are focusing these 2 weeks on a particular atelier and a particular subject?
Yes. Yes, only one subject.
Let's record how our studies are organized in Kyiv, because you and I have one main supervisor who is our main artistic director, our main curator for all 4 years. And this is probably one of the key differences with Europe.
Yes, that's what hooked me when I started reading about where I was going to study. I saw that the system was completely different. I had heard about studying abroad at the University of Lodz, the University of Berlin, or Madrid, and the system was similar to the Ukrainian. You have a master who guides you, a person who directs you on some things, a person to whom you can turn to, and this is the key person. Of course, there are other subjects, but this person manages your learning process and teaches you, of course. In Paris, it's different, specifically at my film school, and I was very taken with it because I like the idea that we will be focused on one topic, we will be focused on one person, and I don't have to study any other subjects that day because it's distracting.
Do you think it's a positive or a negative that you don't have someone who knows you, who has been watching you for all 4 years of study?
Yeah.
Or is it better to pass yourself through many mentors, like you did at La Femis?
Well, my studies in Kyiv didn't end at La Femis because I took a gap year. I didn't want to abandon the Kyiv University. I was still in the 4th year of my studies, and I simply told the university that I wanted to study. They agreed to it, and when I arrived in Paris, I realized that I liked this approach of one master. At La Femis, there was no teacher who just came and went. But of course, there were some curators who made study scams that could help you in some way. You could turn to them, of course, with some questions.
Not DPs?
Both DPs and non-DPs. But these people didn't teach. They didn't have any connection with your studies, for the most part. Sometimes they also gave some master classes, but for the most part they remained people who helped and watched you and your studies, and found tutors for you. That is, the approach was radically different. People remained in their positions, but they did completely different things and in different volumes.
Were you still looking for a mentor in Paris, or did you already have a different focus and were already thinking about something else?
No, this thought of a mentor is not over.
And did you find him?
I continued to look for a mentor, then thought that maybe I would find one in Paris. But I continued to study and didn't find one. And I somehow realized that this is probably not my path to have a mentor. This is already a stage that will most likely pull me back. So I had already outgrown learning from a mentor, and by the time I entered La Femis, I already had all the basic things that a mentor could give me and what we could talk about. And already at La Femis, I found that the mentor I wanted to work with was here. He was coming. He came for a whole month, and I can talk to him as much as I want. I can talk to him after our studies, because he's my friend. He is not just a teacher. The approach at La Femis was that the tutor is your friend. You can address to him as a person, of course with respect, but he remains in your life. You can write to him later. That's why the question of mentoring disappeared at some point at La Femis, because all these mentors came to me. I mean, it turned out that I was looking for them and they were coming by themselves.
Found when you stopped looking for it?
You could say that, basically.
And tell us how long you studied at La Femis and how you characterize it in general. What is the most valuable? Maybe something was missing. I don't want us to criticize anything in this conversation at all. I would rather talk about the positive. But maybe you lacked something, or you realized that you could have taken it, but didn't. A kind of summary of your chapter at La Femis. And in Paris in general.
It was my second home, for sure. I almost lived in La Femis. I was there from early morning until late, or even in the evening. I could stay for a screening and stay almost until night. I liked it very much because The school is very comfortable. It has everything. There is a cinema, there are programs for the cinema, programs in which you will see films that are not available in the internet. The film school, first of all, is very selective in its choice of candidates. Many people want to study there, and only 6 people are admitted to one department in 1 year. So, only 6 people in my group studied with me.
What advice would you give to people who are changing their environment as drastically as you did? It's not even a change of continent yet, but it's still the other end of Europe. You've moved across Europe to a completely new world. Are there any key differences in general, perhaps in the mentality, in the context of our profession?
Well, the French culture is very different from the Ukrainian culture, both in terms of approach and thoughts and people. So, I will start with what I would advise in the chronology as you asked me. I would advise you not to stop and not to give up, because I had no French and was taught in French. Although they said that we would adapt to teaching in English because we are the first time we are accepting people from Ukraine with such a situation. We were people who were not prepared for school, who hadn't been preparing for a year, or 2, or even 3. We were people who were looking for a way forward, and it was also a challenge for them, for the school. So, my challenge was that I had to realize that it would be difficult for me. I had to learn the language, I had to understand the lectures and the people who were studying with me in another language, but I had to do it to get to where I wanted to go and make the most of it. If I'm already here, why not do it? If you already have this opportunity, I think you should make the most of it. And my advice is to keep going, even if it's very difficult. Because it's at these moments that you lose your chance. When it's very difficult and you've already reached the top, actually, you don't know whether you've reached the top or whether you're already climbing over the top. And that's what interests me. And I was constantly moving. I had a feeling that if it was already a peak, it would be very easy for me to move, but I would stop and it would be a problem. That's why I never stopped at that point. I didn't want to stop in front of the difficulties of translation. I was sitting with my phone, with Nikita and Google Translate, asking my classmates in English what the tutor just said. I was lucky that my profession is a profession related to technology, very closely related to technology. And I understood a lot of things practically. What a person was showing, what he was talking about, I already understood. I could avoid asking about some topics.
So, from the presentation, some names of terminology sound the same as in English?
Yes, they intersected, and since I had experience, it played a big role too. Because I already understood 40% of what was taught in the lectures.
40. And at the end of your studies?
At the end, even more, of course.
At this point, we had to pause our conversation because Denys had to go. Please let me know in the comments if you found it interesting and if you want to see the part 2, where we talk about moving from Paris to Toronto and starting out on a new continent as a cinematographer. Have a nice day. Peace.